Our Heavenly and merciful Father, we publicly declare that our hands and our hearts, once aligned with your plan and purpose for our lives, can do great things. And as a people, as we unify our voices, we come collectively seeking counsel, wisdom, knowledge, and understanding to move this country forward in a positive direction. First, by starting with West Bay South. Second, by unifying the district of West Bay. And then, by extension, the entire Cayman Islands, to serve as a beacon for the region, to be the ambassadors to the world, not unlike our seafarers of days of yesteryear. So we invite your presence. We seek your counsel. We thank you for your mercies, your grace, your love, your protection, and your protection. In Christ's holy name we pray. Amen. So just a quick intro, and thanks.
Good night, West Bay South. Kind of new for me because I'm in West Bay North, but that's all right. I'm Alejandro Dominguez. I'm a proud resident of West Bay in a whole. I've almost lived in almost every area here. It's kind of a shame that I can't vote for Mr. Sterling, but I truly support him. It started like a few years ago. I was searching for a job and I couldn't get the application form successfully approved with the qualifications, I guess. And I called in on the show about it on Talk Today, and I said, okay, he might probably listen to what I'm gonna say and maybe do a explanation of why the reason of this happening. But maybe sometimes just talking might just make me answer the questions that I have, right? And especially talking to people that have a better understanding on societal issues, not just the community issues. The community issues start with the family for me, in my opinion. And I believe that Mrs. Sterling is a very good listener. And after being canceled from another show, I went back to Radio Cayman and say, I'll stick with this because at least if anybody have anything bad to think about it, they can keep it to themselves and I'll still have my way and continue talking. I'm that rebellious. I don't comply that easy, but I'm not a bad person. I truly care for the people, and when I see a sense of urgency, I actually get pretty loud. And I when I was in school, that was a big issue. Thank God for some counseling. I got through with it, fought that issue, and now I'm here, have a little bit of courage to speak out. For the encouragement, thank you. For the encouragement and supporting Mr. Sterling. Although I can't vote for him, I encourage anybody that knows what freedom is. And freedom, you wouldn't know what freedom is until you have limitations, and certain limitations do apply when we have a society that has completely forgot about God. We need more God-fearing people. I believe that truly. And that's why I'm here to say what I had to say. And I just hope that everybody can reflect off of that. And I truly believe that every Caymanian could relate to what I had just said, or close enough. So I just, thank you.
Good evening, West Bay South.
Good evening.
Good evening, West Bay South.
Good evening.
All right. It is my absolute honor to be standing here tonight as a patriotic Caymanian and West Bayer to endorse my cousin, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. Even though I am a West Bay North resident as well, it would be terrible of me not to show my full support for our next honorable minister. I always tell him that, that he's our next honorable minister. And the soon-to-be member of Parliament for West Bay South. Sterling is a kind, hard-working, patriotic, and honourable Caymanian who actually deserves the title of honourable. Many of you may be wondering how I am related to Sterling. Well, my late grandmother, Julia Jean Reynolds, nee Ebanks, known to many as Jean, was the niece of Sterling's father, Uncle Asley. I am here to endorse this candidate not because he's my relative, but because he will be a great MP for West Bay South and the entire Cayman Islands. Sterling has a proven track record of where he has allowed every individual to have their voices heard in our country. I had the opportunity of being on his show where I spoke about a couple of issues affecting our country and how I feel that they can be addressed. On many occasions, the same candidate touched base on many critical issues affecting our Cayman Islands as well. And I know that if he had the power to make certain legislations, it would have been done because Sterling is a man of his word. The right people must be elected this time, and we must turn our country around in the right direction, because if we don't, it will be too late. We don't need to hear any more politics. That stops now, not today, Bobo. As I have said before, and I will say it again, you have the power to elect decent politicians, and you also have the power to fire corrupt politicians. We must save our future so that your generation, my generation, the upcoming generation, and future generations will have a Cayman that is as bright as the sun that God made for the earth. It is time for positive change. We can't afford to eat healthy foods because it is too expensive. Our young people can't afford to buy a house because it is too expensive. Our young people can't afford to buy land because it is too expensive. And if they do have the funds to buy land, it will determine if the land is still available to be bought. When our Caymanians return back home after completing their degree overseas, or even on island, they are told that they are overqualified when they apply for a job, and therefore they are not hired for the position that they applied for. Traffic is a huge burden for many of our fellow brothers and sisters in the eastern districts. The dump is running out of space and is getting stinker by the day. Our heritage that is left is deteriorating rapidly. People are being paid chicken feed pensions, health insurance is expensive, and we don't have an updated national development plan. How are we supposed to know which direction our Cayman Islands is going into if our last national development plan was updated since 1997? This is pure foolishness. We should not be in this state. We must urgently revise our national development plan. It has also been reported that we now have a $26.2 million deficit that our hardworking Caymanians will have to pay back, and that the future generations will have to pay back as well, due to too much spending of money for unnecessary things. Money does not grow on trees, and some of these people seem to forget that. It is time to vote these same people out. Seems like the mic afraid of me, but anyhow, I will continue. There are many other issues that are affecting us terribly and need to be addressed when the next government is formed, God's willing. Ladies and gentlemen, do you want representation that you can trust? I will say it again. Do you want representation that you can trust? Because you already know that you have my full support. Even though I am not eligible to vote in this election, I am still doing this to make my voice and every single young Caymanian's voice heard in this election. Our family has your back as well, and we will be with you on this journey. I know that my late grandmother and great-grandfather would have been so proud of you right now because of the stance that you are taking. Politics is not for the weak, nor is it for people that don't take their job seriously. West Bay South, vote number 2, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks on April the 30th, God's willing. The man with the plan, action, and the Caymanian hero that we all need. Have a wonderful night, and may God continue to bless our people, West Bay South, the whole of West Bay, and our beloved Cayman Islands always.
If you ever asked why we're doing this, this is why we're doing this. If you ever wonder what our parents sacrificed for, this is why. Jerrin and Alejandro, muchas gracias, señores. The idea that we live in probably one of the best places in the world, and yet it's taken for granted. We only recognize that when we have friends who've come and have adopted Cayman as home. I won't point out any, but if you look around us, ask, honestly ask, where do you see yourself in 1 year from now? Not 10 years, not 15, not 20. In a very short time, our government has committed this country to significant financial debt with nothing to show for it. It wasn't, in economic terms, an expenditure in order to create needed infrastructure. It was just wanton waste. Jerrin is not yet finished high school, and he can see the money not growing on the trees. Why can't our parliamentarians see the same? Now, a year from now is a very short time. And sadly, it would seem that our elected MP doesn't even have that level of vision for a year, much less 15 to 20 years. And we've got to start thinking longer in order to ensure that what we have now is, nice word that likes to be used, sustainable. That applies as much to our development, our environment, as it is to our financial expenditure to ensure that future generations actually have something that they can literally build upon. Now, most of us know it's a wonderful song being sung, Jerrin is the future premier. You haven't heard it yet? Well, stay tuned, you will. He has a vision. Our job is to facilitate that. My job as the next MP for West Bay South is to do a number of things. Ensure that your collective voice is heard. Ensure that as one of the 19 people that whatever is done includes and involves, because by deliberate invitation, you have not just honest and forthright representation, you have direct participation. How do we achieve that? Well, by assembling here, by having a district council, by having people who actually look to you with a sense of respect and humility, with the ability and integrity, with the honesty and the trustworthiness to ensure that what we do benefits all of us. Go back to why Cayman is such a beautiful place. We've got friends from all walks of life, and yet so often we ignore what they are telling us is happening in our country because they have examples from where they have come. They said if you continue to do the same thing over and over and get the same bad result, you should change it. Time is now to change. I'm asking you for two things. First, April 30th, go to the polls and vote for me, Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. I'm not a salesman. I don't ask for much, and this ask isn't from me. It's a commitment to stand with and stand for this country and its people for today and for tomorrow's generation. This isn't a game. Now, we can have fun doing this, but when work needs to be done, again, these two young men have shared it. You don't run, quit, and hide. You stay the course. You make sure that you are at the helm. You work collectively. You work in unison. You contribute. You listen. See, that's the one thing that has been lacking for too long. We talk at each other. We don't talk with. We talk down. We talk to, but we don't listen to understand with the intent to try to hear and do in a collective, unified, dignified, sensible way. Now, that may seem simple, but yet, as significant as it is, it has been ignored. What is the other ask? In addition to you going out to vote, you're asking your friends and your family whether they live in other, areas, you collectively go. These two young men represent something else that is fundamental to West Bay, a very glaring division in this country that is being fostered through political partisanship that has to stop. And we do that by electing parliamentarians who are prepared to bring the constituency of West Bay back together, even if we still have 4 independent individual constituencies. We have 1 district council. Even if you have 4 elected distinct parliamentarians, they're working in unison for the collective benefit of West Bay, and by extension, for the benefit of the Cayman Islands. My personal desire would be to see us unified as one. Whether that is possible by the next election, at the very, very least, in very practical terms, we have to start the dialogue now, and you have to have the politician with the courage to do so. It is probably easier to campaign and win a vote among 1,000 voters than it may be in 5,000. But it's not about the politician. It has to be about us, the voter. I will go to the polls as a voter, as I will go to the polls as someone seeking to be elected. The only difference is that if elected, my decisions impact and affect the lives of all of us. Therefore, we need to ensure that that person brings to the table not just the competence and ability, but the love and the respect to listen to what the community is asking and desiring. See, too often parents are told that they don't listen to their children, but partly because sometimes maybe the parenting style has been one that was borrowed and copied and never really rejigged. But when you listen to your child, you will actually hear what it is that the child is complaining about, is worried about. And once you have that approach and the child understands that you as the parent will go before them, leading the charge, nurturing, defending, but at the end of the day, extending their voice, knowing that you, as the parent, has that child's back. I commit to you that as the elected MP for West Bay South, I would have the backs of all the voters, not just in South, but the entire country. It is not about allowing others to dictate and define what the political landscape should be if it's at the expense of us now, 1 year from now, 30 years from now. We need to be cathedral builders. We need to leave a legacy that ensures that, I said to Jerrin, the next election, because he wants to be, what's your role, Jerrin? The next premier.
Well,
he has a vision from very young that's what he wants. Why shouldn't we nurture that? Why shouldn't he believe that he can achieve that? Because he can, but he won't. Neither will the child who he wants to be a nurse or a pilot, or she wants to be an architect, an engineer, an educator. The words of encouragement can go a long way, just as the words that cut and divide. Our politicians have done that too long, and that has to change. But that will change with the ethos of people who have the humility and the respect. Now, as we look around and ask ourselves, well, what can we, the individual, do? Well, it takes 2 hands to clap, only one to beat your chest. Each person, when allowed and ensured that there's a space of safety to voice an opinion, to ask a question, then you have an opportunity to make a contribution. That's why the district council is key to the next round of governance, because it'll identify what is important in our respective constituencies that helps us to inform the national plan. But our district council shouldn't just be limited to voters who are self-employed, retired, or private sector. If you're a civil servant, if you're a resident in the country, living in that particular district, maybe you could have a voice, because that district council is no different in a sense if you were a part of the sports club and you were part of that committee, you were part of your PTA or your church. If you are part of that grouping, you should have an opportunity to hear, to participate, and to be heard. That brings us stronger together, more unified, and it allows us to hear a collective voice. I propose a number of things that may seem innovative to some, and if that's a compliment, thank you. But it's fostered by listening. This country wants leadership that listens, leadership that is willing to act, not to be politically expedient, not to be politically convenient, not to pander, placate, or try to pacify any person or political interest. Back to the parent. Sometimes you tell your child no, or you give a child a choice. You're going to bathe, is it now or in 10 minutes? You got a choice here. The choice is you're not going to go bathe. The politically elected must have that level of confidence, compassion, but also certainty in spirit that the decisions that are going to be taken, if they're hard and tough, they may prove unpopular, but if they're right, just like the parent would as a responsible parent, not a lazy parent with a child, those are the same decisions. But if you know that you have, through your district council, through your open participation, to be able to contribute to what is impacting the country and by extension your particular district, then you have a win already. Now, we need to return a level of certainty to our governance. And there are some very simple but significant wins that we can have. Why don't we make the necessary legislative amendments to say specifically when our elections will be held? You might say, well, that doesn't really matter. But yes, it is, because for a few months, the country was up in arms. Well, is it election tomorrow? Is it next week? And then the media, picking up on what is often shared in international media, a snap election. But if you have it fixed in time, there's certainty. That creates stability. It allows the prospective candidate to be able to gear up and to know the incumbent, if she wants to seek re-election, the voter who wants to get registered, you know. Had we had a snap election back last year, 2,000 plus people would have been denied the opportunity to go to vote. In a population of voters of 25,000 amongst 80 or 100,000 in the country, 2,000 people is significant. That voice that have been denied and disenfranchised has been disrespected had we gone to an election. Again, not something that is simple, but is significant. And it speaks to leadership that lacks respect and sufficient responsibility, and leadership that is not representative of a democracy. But let's look at it further. And as you talk amongst yourselves, as you go to your friends and family, as we look at where we're going to go for, a vote, I will offer myself not lightly. I'm not looking for a job, but I'm willing to commit, to stand with and for. And I'm asking, as I have with the others who are canvassing across the entire country, if we are serious about working together for the country, let's demonstrate that on day one. Let's invite the populace to do what we have an example of having been done with Vision 2008. Let's fix the election date. That creates certainty. Let's ask what the name of our ministries should be as a collective sort of group think, crowdsourcing, get input, and let's have those ministries reflect the priorities of our country, and then, and going forward, there are no more changes to the names to reflect the preferences of the politician. What that does is creates continuity in our civil service. So from the accounting perspective and the budgeting, from the skill sets that are being fostered and developed within the civil service, the politicians come and go, but the technical expertise remains. And you have easier transition as you have the expertise there and available. They can inform and assist the politicians in formulating the policies. But those names just shouldn't be willy-nilly. They should be indicative of what the country sees as a priority. We can take the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, housing and infrastructure, where we include under that all the things that would relate to physical development and show that housing, both the cost and accessibility, as a national priority that it should be. Jerrin mentioned earlier, if you even could find something to buy, can you afford it? But let's look at the touted pillars in a society of tourism and financial services. Why not combine them? And if you look at the logistics, it actually makes sense because those two areas get promoted by government's marketing. The people who come for financial services to do board meetings and the like are also tourists. And so that approach gives you a shared synergy that helps you to appreciate the importance of where we are. But what about other areas? Environment and agriculture, or agriculture and environment. Why not, immigration and culture? We say that people come here, but they're not integrated, acclimated. They don't seem to get it. But what about us who live here? So your impact of immigration fostered by an emphasis on culture can merge people so that they feel that their adopted land is also adopting them. Right. I know that for many, change is hard unless you're the person driving the change. But if you think of it this way, I like to pay in cash. So when I pay, I want to get some change back. So change is a good thing. Let's foster that so that it's not about change, it's about transformation. It's about active engagement and participation because you know that your voice is collectively going to be heard. Individually is no less important than the other voice. If we take the classroom teacher, for instance, the lesson won't be effective if the teacher isn't able to convey that lesson and engage those children. But you don't do that by tying them up in a chair and forcing it into their minds. You do it by giving them a sense of purpose. You get them to take ownership. And that's been lacking in our country because we, as a collective, have honestly been ignored. We felt unheard, and it's almost as if we're being talked at. We can change that if we have the courage to do so, and maybe that courage comes from having somebody who will stand with you and stand before you. I have no desire to be a career politician. If I had my way, the next election will be November 2028. And I'll commit to that for two reasons. One, it should indicate that I'm not prepared to go there and be forever, and even though my term will be a few months less and I'll get less pay and get whatever, it's not about me, the elected, it's about us, the collective, us, the voter, us, the country, right? But the other reason, when you analyze it, is how culturally, that was a promise that was made after Ivan, and there are many things that I've heard in canvassing from the Caymanians who experienced that and felt ignored and disrespected. And it's not too late to change. Again, a very simple, small change, but it's significant. You've been heard. You've been, sort of proposing something, and finally, somebody's going to do something about it. Now, it also has the knock-on effect by allowing us to get to work earlier and not have a whole lot of distractions when we look at the impact of Cayman's economy as a result of the US presidential elections while they decide what they're doing. They got about 6 months after that president is elected for them to gear up. If our election is 6 months after that, we've lost a year out of a 4-year term. Last year, which is probably campaigning, so you've got 2 years to do 4 years' work. That's not value for money. Again, small things that have significant impact because we feel as if we were heard, understood, and people did what was asked of them as the employee. That is what the elected politician is, employed by us, the voter. Now I want us to invite a couple of other things that might just change our perspective, give us a sense of hope. Because too often we've been promised and then we expect it to be broken. We've all heard our mamas say, a promise is nothing but a comfort to a fool. We've been taken for fools for too long. We've been somehow beaten into believing that it doesn't matter. One of the most disappointing things that I've found in this particular election cycle is the growing number of people who have said for the first time in their lives, they are thinking about actually not going out to vote. That's an indictment on the politicians, and that is not tenable for this country. That's why the second ask, as you vote, obviously, we want you to encourage others in South to go out and vote for me, and I will offer that representation, but speak to your family and friends. Here are two from a different constituency, but they're all West Bay. Let's speak to all voters everywhere, and if we can, help them to find the candidate of choice. Now, I'll commit to doing a number of things as the elected MP. We need responsible representation that is trustworthy and competent. And I would like to believe that that's in all of us. It may be more evident in some, it may be obviously lacking in others. If you didn't do the job that was given to you as an honor to be elected and you quit, then you can't come back and ask for a raise. So that's gone, right? That leaves 54 others. And as the 19 constituencies respectively go and vote amongst themselves, we know one thing for certain. 19 people will be elected. I have absolute confidence in the elections office and the way they conduct our elections. I have absolute respect in our voters marking their ballots in a free and fair election. Some of us may be encouraged by others. Let's ensure that that encouragement isn't to their detriment, because that promise of something today at the expense of much to come tomorrow and the day after and the next year and then 4 years hence is not something that we can afford. So let's speak to our families, our friends, in the respectful, responsible way, but let's help them to see the bigger picture so that a year from now, you're not regretting what you did today, knowing that 5, 10, 15 years, you're actually on a path. I'm not going to ask you to make significant sacrifices as we did when we were much younger. I'm asking for your active participation through our district councils, through having access to the politicians who are actually genuinely committed to making a meaningful impact. We got choices. We can do or we cannot do. And if we choose to do, then that only leaves one choice. Do it right and do it right. It's as simple as that. You see, we all know the problems. We've all heard for too long, and it's been too often said as the election unfolds. That game has to stop. What we need is a continued concerted effort by those that we elect from day one, not looking to win a seat when the next election unfolds, but who appreciates that, especially now, we have almost $1 billion in the last 2 years, and I want you to drive around, not just West Bay South, but the West Bay, and show me what you got for that. And this is not to be disparaging, but this is an accurate reflection of the glaring failures. And if we want that to continue because we have money growing on trees or falling from the sky, go for it. But you deserve better. I want better for us. I want Jerrin as a future premier to be able to have a country where he can realize a dream so that inspires others who may want to be a pilot or a plumber, who may want to be that physician, right, or that legal practitioner, or who may not be sure what she wants to do today, but she has the educational opportunities because they're being afforded to her, not at some exorbitant rate that excludes her participation. Why is it that we have statistics that say we have the highest GDP in the region and probably in the world, but there's so much increase in poverty? It's not about giving people a handout, but a help up. We want to help each other. Right? We have for too long allowed politicians to discredit and disrespect hard-working people by giving them a handout, and we have been allowing them to continue to do that. And we just come to beg, borrow, and behold. That's not who we are as people. Hurricane Ivan sent a very clear reminder that we have a lot of resilience and resolve, and when called upon, we do not have to wait for anybody to do anything because we come together and do it together. And that's what I'm inviting you, that's what I'm extending to you. So whether you are here seated tonight or comfortably in your house, listening online, or you're going to hear a report from somebody else, understand that the importance is to do it together, understanding how key your individual participation means, because you have a collective, unified voice amongst people who have sufficient respect, who not going to get up and run away because a little light breeze come, who not going to get offended because somebody says something that hurt your little baby feelings, right? You don't need to cuss and fuss and fight to be assertive, And when you are assertive and you stand for what you believe in, that's not disrespect. As I was leaving to come back this side this afternoon, I enjoyed listening to radio came on. Got into the car and Kenny Rogers' song says, Coward of the County, sometimes you gotta fight to be a man. That fight doesn't have to be physical. Right? Our children deserve better. Our parents have worked too hard for too long for it to be taken away. Now, I said earlier that Cayman is probably one of the best. In my mind, the best, but certainly if someone want to say one of the best, I'll argue and say it's the best places to live. It's that way because just cast your eyes just around. You see people who reflect and represent who you are. You get to meet people who have probably only been here for a short time, and many who have been here for decades. And they all say the same thing. It's a great place, but be careful, it's slipping away. A person who's only been here a year can see that, as is the person who's been here 40. But what are we doing about it? And it cannot be incremental shifts where once we were crime-free, we were low crime, or we have less crime. I want no crime in this place. And that is actually possible. It's not an unrealized ideal. It is actually possible. Right? But we can't allow people to tell us that's the price of progress. Look up the word progress. Nowhere can I understand that progress means you get worse. Crime, because of progress, isn't progress. Increased cost of living, less and limited housing, inability to afford education and healthcare. That can be progress. Now, when it was said 20 years ago for whom we were developing, it was never answered properly. Well, let's not ask it that anymore. Let's insist that whatever is done in this country is done to our betterment and our benefit, the collective we. And we can have that, but we need a leadership that understands it's not about seeking re-election. It's about doing the job because the job needs to be done. It can be done with competence. There's going to be compassion and empathy and love and respect. But some people want to propose some project. If they can't justify it, then why should they get it? And that takes away a lot of the perceptions of corruption. If a concession is granted for this thing and it's a widely accepted, demonstrated public document, then it doesn't matter who is doing the project. If the project meets the criteria and a concession is warranted, then it's granted. But it isn't granted at the whim and fancy of some who may be maligned unfairly, but sadly sometimes justifiably, because it's favoring this at the expense of that. That's not progress, and that's not transparency, that's not accountability, that's not democracy, that's not moving your country forward. And those are things that, with the right political directorate, those are the things that give us not just credence and credibility in the country. It makes the international community look at us and say, that's a good place to live and do business. The examples exist in Europe and in other places. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. But sometimes the particular practice for Cayman is different because it has to be Cayman-centric and specific to Cayman. So your leadership must ensure that when they are adopting so-called, practices from elsewhere, that they are seasoned and, flavored to the taste of Cayman. That's all we need. Right? Now, I'm going to invite you to do a few things for us. All right? Come back to the two asks. Let's go out and vote, because if we can talk about it and we can cheer and we can say, boy, we can win this football match, but if we don't put on our boots, put on our uniform and go on the pitch and have a strategy to win, we just talk. So let's ensure that each of us has, one, the courage to do that, and two, the confirmation that we have each other's back. I have your back as the elected person. I have your back now as the campaigner. I know a few of my friends were surprised that, I can speak without smiling. This is serious business. My heart is still full of love, but there's a growing and glaring concern for where this country is going. And if you look very closely at the public information, you'll see increased crime, growing instability, social unrest, a political divide, a strong fear that our young people do not see a hope for their future. And I'm not talking about the returning college grad who can't find a job, or the high school leaver who's unsure whether it makes sense to go to school. I'm talking about the primary school student. The primary school student for whom the world should be at her doorstep. Now, that may be as a reflection of what they're hearing in our homes. It may be repeated in their schools, but it's an indictment on the country if at that age, that is what they're hearing and what they're sharing, because they don't feel like there's any caring from the rest of us. And we got to change that. We got to give them hope as we have hopeful expectation for our future as we age. Now, in the manifesto, I'll take a few minutes and ask you to share it with, but there are things that are readable and relatable. They're easy to implement, but they are significant in this impact. It shows respect for our elderly, not just to the provision of health care, but actually elderly care that looks to their homes and asks, what assistance do they need to make their homes for them as an independent space that they can stay and age and live and be in the space that they know. And there may be simple renovations that not only could be funded through public works or other government entities, in partnership with charities, but as a community working in unison to strengthen the community. One of the biggest things that are going to be the biggest threats to this country is food security. You don't need anybody with any great semblance of education to tell you that if you don't have food that you can eat, you probably out of luck. We need to get back to what we were before. We've seen growing examples of it happening, but it's not being nationalized as a priority. Where we eat what we grow what we eat. There are three legs to, our approach to the next sort of political cycle that should be the mantra and the vision for decades to come. One of them is something that we call EAGLE, EAGLE. It's going to focus on education because that is key. Educated, informed people make good decisions about their life choices, their food choices, the things that they do. The agricultural component feeds their nation. It shows opportunities for entrepreneurship. It shows opportunities for education. It shows a priority and a commitment to our food security. And then the leadership and entrepreneurship gives us what I think is an inculcated ethos in many of us. We want to be our own bosses. And we can foster and harness that by showing them that through all of these things, you can achieve fulfillment. Many people lack purpose, and that's what we want to return. And just like the retiree who can be re-engaged, not just out of necessity for an extra income, but out of a sense that you're not excluded from society simply because you've been retired or you got to some age. When we think about how to achieve that, we need a body of knowledge that can independently look at things, assess, evaluate, and make public what it thinks is good for the public to critique it. You can call it what you want. We can call it a think tank because those things exist. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We've called it the Economic and Social Development Research Institute because that in itself encompasses all that the country needs. It's looking at its social development. It's providing sufficient research. And when you think of the economics of life, it's not just about the accounting or the financial cost. It's about the opportunity cost. It's about what you're doing and how it affects everybody else. And that'll take in the dollars and the cents, not just the dollars and the cents, right? And we gotta have that behind what we're doing so we get value for what we're trying to achieve. Now, unfortunately, the next government would probably be hamstrung with significant debt. That's a reality. It is not something that we cannot work around. It wouldn't be the first time that a country finds itself, but this will be the first time if we allow people who have got us in that debt to go back and say it wasn't me. That's like a song was pretty nice, but it's not a song that we got to play anymore. Right? And despite that sort of financial challenge, there are a couple of things that I think the country needs to expend money on. The Sunrise Adult Training Center is key. And with that programming, we can have the benefit of UCCI and other sort of NGOs or charities to help to partner to ensure that that clientele is loved, nurtured, and respected as they deserve. We don't need buildings for building's sake. We need purpose-built accommodation to ensure access and proper resourcing. But we also need to look at the growing population and question construction of, let's say, another school within our community. That's going to take a little bit longer because there's identifying, well, what you're going to build, where you're going to build, and the like. But we start planning and thinking for that as we think about long-term growth and development for us. But in the meantime, let's focus on our healthcare. Our district health center, could it be expanded to include a number of things? Dental, but we have the Georgetown campus. Does that need assistance? So if we invest in the education and in the health of our nation as priority areas, we'll find that our people benefit. We don't need to build bridges to nowhere. We don't need to install skyways, but we need to look at infrastructure as something unlike what has happened for too long, where we seem to be putting the cart before the horse. Let's take a strong, hard, deliberate, conscious look at what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and how that is going to affect 1 year from now if we start construction on something, but 50 years from now if we build it knowing that it cannot be undone. The priority needs to come back to one simple focus: quality of life. Right. All of this is what this is about: the safety, the security, the stability. Any and all prosperity is to encourage and to ensure that we have an enhanced quality of life. Your political stability, your economic prosperity, your social harmony, they're all interlinked. No amount of money can buy your happiness and your safety forever. But if your community is one that you can move about, knowing that you have access, you're safe, then that's a community that you want to be a part of. We've ignored too many people because we're too quick to label them as this or that. There, by the grace of God, go I. So what if that was you? Or more importantly, somebody you actually cared about? Because some of us care about others more than we care about ourselves. So let's do that thing for that person, because that is one of us. They are we are them, and that is why they ask. You go to vote, you encourage others to do the same across all of the constituencies, so that there's a clear, convincing commitment by this country as to what the next 19 people should do, and let it be us, the voter, that decides that. Now, we look at the political, and I'll leave this with you for the final thing, landscape, and we say, well, this might happen, that might happen. It might. But if we are actively participating, we'll ensure that the people who are elected are the people that we want elected. And through that, I can honestly say that I've never been so encouraged when all of the candidates from all the other areas just call and say, how are we doing, how's it going? Good camaraderie. But boy, if you get in, we know we can work with you. For Alejandro to share what he's shared, the importance to be able to listen to people, to hear them, to actually genuinely hear what they're trying to say. Not to shut them down because you don't like whatever it is that they're doing at the time. We have no choice but to work for the betterment of this country. And we have to do it to the best of our ability. And we've got to ensure that all of that affects us now, a year from now, and a century from now. And that's the vision that we have to have. Because we are not going to be here in 100 years. That's probably the only certainty that it may possibly be. I'm pretty sure that. But the legacy we leave, the things that we do, will affect people in 100 years. That is not a stretch of the imagination. It's not an exaggeration. There are many trees that will take decades to come to maturity. But if it wasn't first planted and nurtured, it will never get there. And we can enjoy the fruits of the sacrifices that our parents and grandparents made. Let's rejig that just a little bit and make it an investment, because we take a vested interest. We're committed to a country where there's prosperity economically, there's stability because it's political civility, and then there's societal commitment and engagement because you know that your voice ranks equally as everybody else's. And with that, we'll have a unified nation where the quality of life allows each of us to feel respected, to feel represented, But most importantly, we know that our children's future has a semblance of being filled with hope. That's why we are here. Thanks very much. You're welcome to have a chat and ask questions. You may say, well, how do I move from here and go out and get others? There's some, Jerrin can probably tell you. But I want you to know that this is just the beginning of greater things to come. We have to have faith, we have to have hope, we have to believe, but at the end of the day, we got to have the resolve, the resilience to know that through our tenacity and our determination, better can come and better will come. On the 30th, I'm asking for your trust, your confidence, your voted support, because at the end of the day, what we're going to be about is us. We are the we. Thank you. All right.